Mr. Jaishankar, how do you see the election actually? It is just, tomorrow voting will take place. So how do you see the race overall?
The U.S. elections in 2024, the presidential elections, are very close. They may change on the basis of a few 100,000 votes here or there. I think the big issue will be turnout, voter turnout on election day, which is tomorrow, Tuesday, November 5th. And really that will determine the outcome in seven what are called swing states, which are the seven states that are very close and where the margin will really determine the overall outcome.
What are the main issues actually that will impact the election?
There are many issues on the table. I'd say sort of three stand out. One is the economy, and while again the fundamentals of the economy seem to be doing strong, the unemployment is very low, inflation has come down, and growth has been quite strong relative to G7 economies. The fact is that voters don't feel that there has been a major improvement, so that will be one issue. Two others that are on the ballot, really, one is immigration, something that former President Trump has really campaigned on, sort of stricter, more limitations on immigration, particularly illegal immigration. And the third has been abortion and abortion reproductive rights for women, something that Kamala Harris has campaigned heavily on.
India-American community is also a very important segment of the voters, particularly in states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Michigan. So how do you see, what are the issues that will kind of impact the voting pattern by the Indian Americans?
Indian Americans have traditionally voted overwhelmingly Democrat. They're amongst the ethnic groups that have been the most reliably Democrat. But there is some sense that there may be a shift in recent polls, including one by the Carnegie Endowment, suggests that there might be a minor shift, particularly amongst younger male voters, many of whom are gravitating towards the Republican Party and Donald Trump. We'll have to see how much that is. But that being said, Indian American voters have been are in sizable numbers in a few key swing states, particularly Georgia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Michigan. And they've also played major roles as donors to both the Republican and the Democratic Party.
How do you see, in fact, if Harris comes to power, what will be the kind of approach she will have for India, and what will be the administration's approach if Donald Trump helps the office?
I think neither, the good news is that for neither of them, it has not been a major election issue. And most of the countries that are major election issues are so for the wrong reasons, and this includes conflict zones, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, and potential adversaries such as China, Iran, and North Korea. So I don't see a major change, deliberate change for that reason. But that being said, I think there will be some important differences in their approach to India based on the outcome. For Trump, I think there will be some difficult negotiations over trade and immigration, although on many other issues he has spoken of a very positive relationship with India and with Prime Minister Modi. On the other hand, I think with Harris, there will be some continuity with as what we've seen under a Biden administration over the past 4 years. But I think there will be more of a progressive agenda in foreign policy, and that may have some implications for the relationship with India.
So the initiative under ISET actually was one of the finest initiatives in India-U.S. relations. The defense ties are also growing very rapidly because we recently signed a very important deal to procure 31 Predator drones from the U.S. So how do you see the overall India-U.S. global strategic ties going forward in the next few years?
Some aspects of the defense relationship have gone well, and I think ISET has been a useful mechanism for the national security advisors of the two countries to be in direct dialogue on some of the big strategic and technological issues of the day. But I think we will start seeing fewer and fewer Indian purchases of US military equipment. Because there has been more of a push by India towards indigenization. And I think the question is really, where can you see investments in defense and other high technology sectors in India that actually contribute to India's own defense and technological indigenization? And that is really, I think, where things are. So I don't foresee too many major defense purchases off the shelf. From the US or from any other country for that matter for India, but more of a defense technological collaboration. And this will get into some very tricky issues regarding export controls, amongst other things, financing mechanisms, and technological sharing arrangements.
You've been closely tracking the India-US relations in the last few years. So what, according to you, will be the other areas that, in fact, both sides can expand cooperation?
I think energy will be a big one. The nature of that will be different depending on under a Republican administration or Democratic administration. A Democratic administration will focus more on climate change and renewable energies, clean and green energy. Republican administration more on fossil fuels, oil and gas. But either way, I foresee a much closer energy relationship because India and the U.S. are two of the largest consumers, and the U.S. is in many ways a net exporter of some kinds of energy. So that I think is one. Technology overall, both the military and the civilian, it will matter for both countries. The standards that they both set together will matter. Defense and security a little bit, strategic relations in third countries, and particularly in the Indo-Pacific and in West Asia, what in the US they call the Middle East, there is more of a convergence. There's less so on some other issues. I would say, and to some extent, the development agenda, although that would be more under democratic administration. So I think these are, you see a pretty broad-based areas of collaboration, although there will be certain differences, and we've seen some of them come up in the last few months and years.
Mr. Jaishankar, India's ties with Canada has been on a free fall actually because Canada has been sheltering a lot of separatist elements and there have been a number of issues. So how do you see the Canada issue impacting India-US relations because Canada has also been a kind of close partner of US?
I think what we've seen happen between India and Canada has put the U.S. in an awkward situation. It wants to support a growing relationship with the U.S. Between the U.S. and India, but at the same time, Canada is obviously its largest neighbor. It is one of its largest trade partners. It's a close ally in many respects. Obviously, the U.S. does not want to see this deterioration in relations, but the fact is it has happened. I think the question is how do you contain the fallout of it? And how do you make sure that India's sensitivities are taken into account, given the very now political nature of the allegations that have been made in Canada?
So again, coming back to India-US, I mean, are you essentially saying that irrespective of who becomes the president of US, 47th president of US, the India-US trajectory is going to go forward in a significant way?
I think it will go forward, but I do think it requires a bit of caution because I think there are some difficulties in the relationship, and those difficulties have to be managed. For the most part, over the past 20 years, those difficulties, the differences have been managed by both sides. So I think it's not going to be easy, but I do think that there is room for that relationship to grow. Also, it will grow in different ways, depending on if it's a Republican or Democrat. So it won't look exactly the same, and that is, I think, what observers in India need to pay attention to.
One point, in fact, in Indo-Pacific, actually, our cooperation have been rising very significantly. Quad has made certain decisions to have a military hue, actually, overall in maritime domains. So how do you see the overall cooperation between the two sides in the Indo-Pacific, where we have seen growing Chinese military muscle flexing?
There's growing comfort levels between India and the US. There was just another army exercise held, and these have become very regular. I think, though, this will now lead into some other questions about, what the security scenarios look like, and where the two countries where their interests converge, and where their capabilities converge, and where will they actually put some of that potential cooperation into action. Actually, I think a bigger test of that was what we saw recently in the Arabian Sea around attacks by the Houthis against shipping. But I think there are many other scenarios where this relationship will come into play.
So overall, again, coming back to the election, in fact, I mean, what is your last word actually? Who is going to get into the White House?
I don't know. We will find out over the next few days, and it may take weeks because if it's a very close election, this may require there will be legal procedures as well. So this may not be solved immediately. But I think some people have said that these American observers that India is in a bit of a sweet spot. That with either candidate there's enough in the relationship to develop the relationship. That's not to say that it's not without its challenges. But I think the fact that India has not been an election issue is something that many should welcome.
Mr. Jaishankar, thank you so much for talking to PTI.
Thank you.